Before you go and listen to this episode of the podcast, I gotta ask you a favor. To help me in making this podcast, please head onto the app or the website you are listening to the podcast right now and leave a 5-star rating. And if you want to go the extra mile and help me even more, leave the review. It will be a great help for me and for the podcast. And now, after you rated and left the review, please enjoy this episode of Tommy's Outdoors. This is Tommy's Outdoors 62. And we talked about the book, Whittled Away, Ireland's Vanishing Nature, at least twice on the podcast. First, in episode 20, our guest was Pádraic Fogarty, who is the author of the book and campaign officer at Irish Wildlife Trust. And then I brought you a presentation by Pádraic titled Whittled Away. And today we're going to talk about a photographic project whittled away or inspired by that book. And with us today, Pádraic Cross. How are you, Pádraic?
I'm very well. This is a novel experience for me.
Very good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you. Tell me, when the first time you come across the book, and was it like you had the book in your hands and it was like straight away the idea that you have to illustrate it with the photos, or was it something that came back to you later?
Well, I actually haven't met Pádraic in the flesh yet. We haven't even talked on the phone yet, which is interesting. It's
really?
All correspondence.
Okay.
And I wrote an article based on my master's thesis, and it was in the Irish Wildlife Trust magazine. Mm-hmm. And at the time I talked to Pádraic briefly and he did a very good editing job. I was being a bit precious about the way, you write your work and you think it's perfect, and then the edit comes back and you go, oh my God, they changed something. Mm-hmm. But very good editing job. And after that, he was kind of on my radar a little bit, still hadn't met him. And because of the area I work in freshwater quality as a designer, that book is quite prominent. It's, in my experience from when I used to be involved in academia, I think it is the premier book in Ireland on natural history, degradation of biodiversity, not climate change really, but by far and away, it's the best book I've read on the subject. So I had in my head I needed to read it, and when I did about a year and a half ago, I got to the point where the photographs are, and I realised there aren't actually a lot of photographs in this book. Mm-hmm. The ones in the centre are good. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, I spend a lot of time in these kind of environments anyway. I don't know why. I'm kind of attracted to them. I'm out in natural areas, but I tend towards places that maybe have a lot of human activity. Mm-hmm. And we're actually pretty close to some here. In the south of Cork, you've got a lot of gravel pits.
Yeah.
Open cast mining, which are kind of passive. People just look at them and they're just there. You walk your dogs in them. I used to play in them as a child, just one of about 5 minutes from here. You used to get into truck bumpers and push ourselves over the edges. So a passive thing. Yeah. And I got older and you start kind of recognizing the damage that they cause. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's economic activity, fair enough. There's jobs involved, but it's not normal to be surrounded by open cast mines. I mean, it's a facet of life, but it isn't normal. Yep. So I always had that in the back of my head. And this book really highlights that in Ireland about kind of normality of situations, that a country shouldn't really be all conifer plantations and agricultural land that's damaged. Mm-hmm. And there's reasons for why, and it's good and bad, and it's shades of grey. I'm not pointing fingers at people, but because I do take photographs for my work, and I do it in my spare time, and I do take photographs of these kind of damaged environments, it just made sense. I'd already had correspondence with Pádraic. I thought the book was amazing, heavy. It's hard to read, to be honest, for me. Yeah. And I thought maybe, can I add something to it? Like, can I bring this further? And also another factor is, I think I was getting a little bit weary with the environmentalism thing. I see it happening where it can be, it can get depressing. If you wallow in it, you become too involved in it. And I felt like I was stepping back a little bit from it, not trying to be some kind of crazy eco-warrior priest, but I do want to have some kind of involvement. And I thought, how can I add to something that I care about? Yes. And I read the book and thought, well, maybe photographs, large-scale photographs would help this narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your plan? Is it like how do you see, or is it, I know that we
No, I do have one.
yeah. We briefly spoke over the phone, and I know that I think that the idea is still crystallizing in your head exactly how it's going to look like, but surely you have some ideas.
I've gotten a little bit more solid in the idea. At the start, I just got on to Pádraic and was like, do you want to do this? Does it make sense? And he did. Because in his opinion, it's a different audience, maybe a wider audience. It's just a new medium, which is always a good thing. So the plan at the moment is 10 or 12 large scale prints, not huge, A0, which is about a little over a meter across the bottom, and tour them around various places in Ireland. So I didn't, at this stage, is like, okay, that's a great idea. Now, where am I going to go with it? Like, because Pádraic's busy, you know, as in I said to him, if you're into the idea, I'll do this, but I'm not going to be harassing you, like, you know, as in I'll just work away. So I was advised by a friend of mine to ask people where I work. I work in the Environmental Research Institute. It's probably a good place to start looking for, just for the money to do the prints and the framing and a supporting photo book, because I want to do a book that supports the prints.
Yes.
And Maria Kieran, who's inside in the Green Campus initiative in UCC, has offered to support it. Now, it's a little bit up in the air, but that's the idea at the moment. So that... because they're having their 10th anniversary of that program this year, 2020. Pádraic's coming down to talk next month. And we're kind of wrapping it all together.
All right.
So she's going to try and get the money together for the prints and the book. And then we'll try and tour them in other green campuses in Ireland.
Okay.
And maybe the Glucksman, which I've ever been to the Glucksman inside in UCC. It's the gallery there, which I love, which was kind of one of my ideal spots. And then I have friends that like the Good Day Deli is a place inside. It's a new deli inside in Cork. Well, it's a restaurant. It's in Nanonagle Place, and my friends own that. They're very serious about environmental protection. Maybe there. So now it feels like I have the structure there, but maybe only 2 of the images so far. I've worked on the structure, and I've taken 2 shots that I think will probably be in the series of 10 or 12.
But isn't like I think it's actually better because you have all the kind of boring stuff, making air quotes done, and now you can focus on the art part of it, of what you actually love to do. Wow. So they're like A0. They're quite big.
They're large. I think it's with the camera I have, it depends on how big you want to go with these prints. 1200 millimeters across the bottom. Is that right? 120? Over a meter. And then if you frame them, they're probably 1.5 meters. But this is an important question in a project like this of what's your impact trying to be? These are questions, like I've been taking photographs for a long time, but what are you trying to convey? Are you trying to make things look pretty or ugly or just normalize? As in, if you're taking a picture of a conifer plantation, are you trying to make it look intentionally dark? And the size of the print is one of these factors. People tend towards giant prints and landscapes just because it's impactful, I suppose. Whereas a portrait, we're surrounded by them. Portraits can be small and impactful. Landscapes tend to work, not necessarily, but they look good big. So why not go as big as I think this camera can just about go? Go maximum.
Let's go geeky about the camera.
Okay.
So what's for this size of the print? What is a pixel count that is most important, right?
Megapixel for landscapes. There's a megapixel war going on with cameras where everybody thinks the more the better, which isn't the case because then you have noise issues and all these other nerdy things.
This is why there's cameras. I think that Sony has it, and now Canon
60 megapixel.
Yes, and now Canon is they doing EOS RS. I think
it's gone up again.
67 mega. That's like what?
And then Fuji medium format, 100 megapixels, a camera I want.
Yes. So this is the reason. This is why they're bumping up the megapixel count, because the target audience are landscape photographers.
There's 3 reasons, in my opinion. Billboards. Who shoots billboards? There's about 100 people in the world.
Of course.
Landscape photographers. There are a lot of them. And the last one is just having the camera with the highest megapixel count.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest one. How many megapixels are your camera? Oh no.
Because if you look at what are considered pro bodies, they're usually 20 megapixels.
Yeah.
That's the sweet point, or 24 maybe.
Yeah.
Because then you tip into the size of the physical size of them and noise and the signal and all this stuff.
Exactly.
So what I'm using is a 6D, Canon 6D, which is it's a fine camera. It's full frame. It's from 2012.
Yeah.
I'm moving away from it like everybody into mirrorless because we all just want new gear.
Was it EOS R?
No, I was considering it, but I've been bitten by the Fuji bug. I just, because I shoot a lot of film cameras, love film, really do. And it made me much better at taking pictures because you pay for every shot.
Yeah.
And it feels like an old film camera. And for a while, I was a little bit iffy about image quality, but it's just more fun. I pick it up more often. I use it more often.
Is that they put the Fuji? What is it called? The
XT1 is probably the most famous one.
This is the one where you can set up on the that the photo will look like a on the old film, and you can pick which type of film.
They've got all these film. Well, the X Pro 3 has the back where you can see the actual little film kind of graphics.
Yes, that's the one.
A little bit ridiculous. Yeah. But they're famous for out-of-camera shots that look like film. Exactly. Because they've been at it forever. Fujifilm's been around for 80 years.
And then you're saving on the post-production time, right? You don't have to do that as much.
I don't use JPEGs really, to be honest, where that's the format that has the film emulation on them. I tend to shoot in RAW just because you've more manipulation. But so it doesn't. But people do love that, and it does look amazing.
Really? So it does only on JPEG?
Yeah.
Of course.
But what they do then is they give you the profiles if you're editing it in Photoshop. So you can apply to your RAW. They're automatically there. So the camera that you have, you put the file into Photoshop and it automatically shows the profiles in Photoshop as well. Yeah,
okay. And you're not worried about the like availability of glass for Fuji. I mean, like Canon has these RF lenses. They're like everybody.
Price though.
I know, but everybody's raving how great they are for their mirrorless system.
Like, how much can you do with a photograph is always a question that comes back to. At the start, I was technical. It needs to be perfect. And then my aunt, who's an artist, was like, it doesn't need to be perfect. It should be emotive. Yeah. It should be a narrative. Yeah. You can have a rough picture. The obvious one is war photography. They're not perfect, but they're the most powerful pictures. So how perfect does it need to be? How big does the glass need to be? I like them and I would love to be able to afford them, but when I pick up the Fujis, it's more fun. Yeah. It's more emotional. You want to carry it around with you. With the Canon stuff, it feels like a tool, which is fine. Yeah. And it's my work camera, actually, is the Canon. It's beefy and it's tough and I don't mind if I drop it. Yeah. But no, Fuji love.
Okay. That's right. Good to know. So going back to, for your photos, you think 20 megapixel for A0 print should be enough? Just
about. Because you think about how far people are going to stand from them. That's probably the big one, because people were taking
you're right. Nobody will be close with a magnifying glass, pixel peeking.
I might be. It depends. It depends. In a gallery, they could be, but what's natural? 5 feet, maybe, or something. 4 feet. But inside 4 feet, it's probably getting like you're looking at pixels.
Well, if it's a big one, you need to stand back to actually see the whole thing.
Yeah. So I reckon there's no consensus on this, but I think A0 is about as big as I would go with a 20 megapixel camera. But I mean, there was billboards that were 100 feet across at some stage shot on 20 megapixel. So it depends. If you're 500 yards away, it'll look perfect. So, but that's where I'm at. And I'm going about as big as I'm comfortable going with that camera.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. I also think that it's going to be quite a logistic project to move them from one place to another.
Something I haven't thought about. They're quite, I've kind of, it's in the back of my mind, but that's a lot of big frames and they're fragile. Yeah. And they're way more fragile when they're that size. Yeah. That's true. Someone's going to have to pack them carefully into a van.
Would it be better, like, I don't know about the cost thing, but I'm almost imagine like you can print those photos for each location.
No, it's the framing is the problem. Like,
I know.
Well, look at it this way: the book and the prints will be about $5,000. So you wouldn't be doing it for each one. Well, I wouldn't, because originally I was going to print them myself, and then I was looking at the size and the quality, and it just felt prohibitive, the price. And if you try to do it for each one, unless somebody wants to give another $50,000 for it, wouldn't happen. But logistics is interesting. I wonder. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You've added another problem to the project. I'll write that one down.
Well, but if you can safely kind of put those frames apart and transport them in that way, not like a big one, because otherwise you need to kind of truck or like a big vehicle.
Yeah, you'd almost need, like, if you were bringing a removal thing for paintings, sort of, I don't know. I'll ask my aunt about that one. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Do you want to fund the removal process now?
Oh, well, but we can definitely organize something through the podcast and through my platform.
Oh, well.
Maybe you heard about the Patreon right?
Yeah.
Well, do you have are you on Patreon?
No, I'm not.
Well,
These are new to me.
here's a tip, right? Let's do this. And what we also can do, we can put at least, on my website, on your website, like a donate button, right?
Yeah. Just for the transport.
just for the
That's all we need.
Or maybe someone who listens to that right now has a truck parked in their yard. So if you're listening to that podcast,
and they're very careful.
you know how to find us. You know how to find the No, but that's a serious thing, right? If anyone of the listeners have an opportunity to organize and help in that project in transporting. So what are we talking about? We're talking about 6, 10 prints?
10, probably 10. It was going to be 12, but I think 10 makes more sense because not every subject's going to jump at you. Mm-hmm. And some of these subjects are kind of plain, you might describe them as, because it's the normality of what we're doing around us. Mm-hmm. So I think 10 makes sense. Yeah. And they're quite large. Yeah, that's it. 10 big prints in frames.
Yeah. Okay. So we appeal to all the listeners, if you can help, please, and obviously we'll give you a credit, and maybe we even record a podcast, or maybe
we'll give you a photo book.
Yeah, exactly. And we can also film the whole operation, whatever you want. Just get in touch and get involved. Okay, do you think you will take like hundreds or tens and tens of photos, and then you select them? Because you already said like, I already have a photo. So I presume that was the moment you took the photo and it's like, yes, this one.
No, that's not me.
So this is what I'm aiming at. Like, is it like you're taking photo and you see that photo, so like, yeah, this is the one, or you will have like 100 of them and you're gonna be mulling over
the latter.
And just like, maybe this one, maybe this one.
I think with me, it's the latter. I know other people don't work like that. There's a guy, there's a well-known YouTube landscape photographer, Thomas Heaton. I think he's more of the one shot and that's it. Whereas with me, I work, he's very methodical. I tend to go a little bit faster. And I'm there as well for my own experience. I find I don't want to just be clung to the camera and see nothing. Because I was in the Bog of Allen the other day for the first time. Kind of a shocking place, to be honest. I didn't realize there was a place like that in Ireland. And the experience was as important to me as taking the photograph. So retrospectively, I looked through them and I was like, this one is the strongest. I don't want to take 200. If you take 50 or 60, I think you can go overboard. You should maybe take 2 or 3 of a certain scene. In fact, I was in such haste, I probably didn't do it technically right. It's just within the borders of what I'd be willing to print noise-wise. Yeah. But I take more. And I think you can do it. And maybe when I go further down this path in 10 years, I'll take one. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just inexperience. I haven't been taking landscapes for 20 years. Yeah. I'm not sure, but I like this aspect. And I like the fact afterwards, some photographs, you think that was great, and it actually wasn't. And you go back and it's something else, innocuous, that looks a lot better. Yeah. And it's more powerful.
Yeah. I always, I was wondering, because I heard a lot of you. Yeah, we go there, we take only one photo. Like, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. You surely take like, at least a dozen, and then you pick one. You get rid of the rest, and you say like, yeah, I'm coming back from the shoot with one photo, and this is where I can believe that, right? But the guy goes to expensive safari to Africa, right? And it comes back and says like, I have 5 photos. I only took 5 photos. But it's like, well, okay, you selected you selected 5 photos that are which is great, right? You have 5 great photos out of the 2 weeks shoot. But I don't believe you that you took like 5 photos, right?
So he spent $5,000 on his gear, and each photograph cost him $1,000. That sounds a bit superfluous to me.
I don't believe that.
There's I laugh. I have a habit of reading comment sections, and I don't know why. And if I'm looking at photography things, and it's a weird
on YouTube. Man, that's probably the worst place to read comments. Right?
I know it's like
YouTube is famous for
it's like human anatomy. I just can't help myself. I can't. I have to watch the kind of I don't know. It's like it's a bad habit, but there's a lot of ego in photography. I don't know why.
It's everywhere.
I don't get it, because everybody has a phone. Everybody can take great pictures, but I think maybe they feel, I don't know why there's a lot of ego there. And that sounds like, well, I only took 5 pictures in Africa. Like, well, then more fool you. Like, what if one of them isn't that good? Like, I don't know if that sounds.
They're all perfect, I'm sure.
I didn't even need to. Somebody else pressed the shutter.
Well, I think that this is one of the things that the ego is in every discipline, and the ability to easily communicate, and I think that also the ability to very, narrowly show something, right? Is like, you can present something online and this is only this you're controlling, and you don't show all the rest.
Yeah, context is very important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was even thinking about that, you know, a lot of people have their absolutely crazy ideas, right? And they can say like, I'm a professor on whatever, you know, made up university, and this is my, right? And people listen and say, actually makes sense, right? Well, previously, before the internet, right? Everybody knows this guy, right? He's a wacko, right? Like, we know him, and he comes back and he gives this great idea, but people have all the context who the guy is. Like, here's like, so this is what you're saying. Like, the guy has a phone, and say, I've been in Africa and I take only 5 photos. Like, you haven't even, you know, been in Africa or something like it, right? So,
someone else took them for you.
Yeah, but at least that was something. So I think that's happening everywhere. Okay, so you think you're gonna how long you gonna be doing this? Do you have like a timeline?
Yeah, which is good for me because I'll fall off from it for a while, and
but then you're gonna feel the pressure.
Yeah, but that's probably a good thing sometimes. But I'm very
depends how you handle pressure.
Yeah, and it also depends on a very important factor, something that I kind of call beauty bias. Am I chasing good light or not? I kind of talked about it a while ago. Like, I think I've taken 2 of the images, in my opinion. I have. And they were both, I went there one day and I took them. Not the best way maybe to take photographs, but it worked out fine. So let's say there's 8 more, and you're not going to do all of them in one day. There's going to be some problem. It's going to be raining or something. Yeah. But the question that keeps on jumping into my mind is, am I going looking for good light? Because then it's time consuming. You know, are you going there early in the morning? It's overcast. Are you waiting for the next day? With landscapes, there's this very traditional idea that the light should be good. And it makes it more interesting. It makes it more volumetric, more 3D. Yeah. But why are you trying to make a conifer plantation beautiful? I keep coming back to this question in my head. It isn't beautiful. It's not meant to be. And I think they're ugly. Yeah. So, you know what I mean?
They're dead.
Exactly. I mean, they're ecological disaster, in my opinion. Like, so yeah, this is a question I can't get away from. How much time am I going to put into it? It will be finished by the summer, definitely.
By the summer?
Yep.
Oh.
So it should be,
that's quite aggressive schedule, I would say.
Yeah, but I've been very, very casual with it. Like, I reckon, now I know I actually have a list written down here behind me of the subjects, which I might read out to you in a second, of what I'm going to shoot.
Okay.
And here, I'll do that now. We'll make some noise with our chair.
Yeah. Just for the listeners, Pádraic is a audio geek, probably much bigger than I am, and we have like absolutely soundproofed room here. Sort of perfectly soundproofed room, and we have a chairs that are squeak a little bit.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't mind. So leave a comment if you heard the chairs.
If you hear the chairs rustling. So that's what we have at the moment. The 2 I've shot, I think overfishing is the one I probably know more about. I'm not an academic anymore. I never was that deep into it, but that's the area I looked at a lot. And the shot for that was the old fishing school in Baltimore in West Cork. I don't know if you've ever been to that building. It's an amazing building in that town.
No.
It's just down by the quays as you're driving in. An incredible place that it's mentioned in the book right at the start. Actually, that was one of the triggering points for the photo project. One of the first places he mentions is a place that I have shot on film, a place I love because I was there all my life. And it's this bizarre stone and vaulted wood ceiling building. Looks like a boatyard kind of. And they went through 2 cycles of booms and busts in that fisheries. I think it was pilchards and mackerel. Yeah, pilchards. I heard about this, the big pilchard boom. Yeah, and this building has been through all of that, and it's a good starting point. And in the image, you can see the new fishing fleet, what's left of it, down by the quay. So that was the first one. And the second one, I wanted to go to maybe the most dramatic spot that in my head would probably be peat extraction, because weirdly, I don't think I've ever been to any of those places in Ireland because they're in the Midlands and I'm always on the coast. Yeah. And in my head, I was like, well, if I want to see the biggest industrial issue in Ireland, it's probably that. So the next one was the Bog of Allen, near where the Board and Mona headquarters were, which is about a month ago. Yeah, that's an amazing thing. Yeah, it's crazy. I remember
I had no idea about what peat extraction is, and why would anyone on earth extract peat? Like what's the deal with that?
Yeah.
And then I watched the videos of peat extraction, and like amateur videos. Someone shot it with a phone. And I was like mesmerized. I probably spent like an hour and a half just staring at YouTube videos of all those machines that are extracting peat. And then, like you said, then there comes the next thing, like what this thing does to
what's left.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, because like the first thing is like, oh, it's, you know, it's almost doesn't do any damage. Like, but then you think like, well, you know,
well, you're scraping it's like scraping the skin off something. And look, there's always a reason for something at some stage. Back in the day, they were burning peat for a reason of war efforts and survival and heat. Granted, you know, you're not pointing your finger at that scenario. And to be honest, it's winding down now. Bord na Móna aren't really in a great position at the moment. And well, the peat's gone as well. Like most of those bogs have been long scraped. But I still wanted to go see it. And I am taking that into consideration. I'm just trying to show you drive right past those places. Like Pádraic talks about that in the book. You drive past them, you don't really notice them, and stopping and getting out and walking through them. And what I found very surprising is they're open to the public. It's public property as far as I know. So it's not like a gravel pit where you're not meant to walk into it. You just stroll into them. And they're like a moonscape into the distance, into the horizon, black. It just looks like charred earth. Well, I'll give you the rest of the subjects there while I've got it open in front of me. We've mentioned conifer plantations. I think sheep and overgrazing, because I have driven through the Cork-Kerry Mountains all my life and they are like a moonscape. Salmon farming, maybe. Contentious. My father knows a lot about it. He was a professor of zoology and salmon genetics was his thing. We've hit peat extraction. Dairy farming, the most pervasive thing in the country. I have friends that are dairy farmers. We have argued about this previously. Badgers. I have a very grim badger story, which I might go into. Freshwater pearl mussels. Kind of a weird one. Yeah. And I think it's an interesting subject because it's underwater.
No, it's worth talking about because people don't realize the issue.
And how delicate they are and how strange their life cycle is. I don't know a huge amount about them, but a friend of mine who would do a very good podcast for you actually, who works in this area, his name is Ray Foley. He was telling me about them the other day and their life cycle sounds unbelievably fragile. Hold on, we'll finish this. Hedgerows, pervasive again. Channel rivers, because a bugbear with this one, the Carry On and Bandon bothered me. Did you see what the OPW did to the river in Bandon?
Yeah.
That I did a video clip about that, and that is just standard Irish nonsense in my opinion. Like that is just terrible built solutions, disregarding any other issue. Once again though, I get you don't want your businesses flooded. I get it. But can we progress? Like, can we do anything new? Or are we just going to keep on channeling rivers like that? It's unbelievable destruction down there.
Yes.
Gorse fires. That's probably one of the main ones. Something I've been seeing my whole life. Overfishing I've covered. And the last one, I think, rhododendron. Because it's a one that's like, it's normal.
Rhododendron.
Yeah, I
heard something about the army fighting rhododendron.
Yeah, everybody's at it. And just like in the book, I used to crawl around in them when I was young. And it was a long time before I realized what they were doing. Yeah. And I like those subjects that are sort of banal and you look at them and go, oh, it's a plant. Yeah. But then the impact is severe. Yeah. So I want some of them to be visually interesting and some of them to be visually plain, but the interest is in the subject.
I not long ago learned that rhododendron was actually native to Ireland in the interglacial. I think during the last interglacial. I didn't know that. Yeah, it was
that particular one.
Yeah, it was native in Ireland, but apparently we also had animals that were grazing it. Okay. And that's why it wasn't a problem.
Okay, I thought it was introduced. No, that one's off the list.
Well, no, that it is introduced. Yeah, you know,
in between the last time there was an ice age.
Yes, okay, yes. So I'm really shallow on my knowledge about that. All I know is that in the last interglacial, it used to be native to Ireland, and it was all okay because it was grazed by various species of animals, of megafauna or whatever. Right. Was at the time. Yeah. And so I have a podcast, I don't remember the number of that podcast, about megafauna, about what's a Pleistocene megafauna,
like mammoths and things like that.
Like mammoths. Well, yeah. And I give you a contact to the guy who I recorded that, Richard. I can't recall his name. I know Richard. He has a blog and he's big into rewilding and wolves. So you guys might talk about it, and so. But just go back to your thing. Do you plan to have like an explanation to those photos?
Yeah.
In that book.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to go direct passages from the book, but maybe sometimes it might need a little bit more nudging because you don't have the full context of a chapter. So what I see in my head is print up on the wall, passage from the book, or maybe slightly modified by the author if he's interested in doing that. And something that I think, I haven't said this to Pádraic, I think people struggle with a subject that can be disoppressive. You know what I mean? As in, like, it is a heavy book, and it's difficult to look around you and be like, well, there's a lot of damage going on. What I would like to put into it is potential solutions, where you've got the paragraph, and then underneath it go, this is maybe a solution to this problem, or something, a positive contributing factor. I don't want to, I'm not trying to lighten the mood, but it's important to people, I think, that they're not going in going, well, that was depressing. Yeah. That was 10 depressing pictures and I'm going home and I'm miserable. Like, there are solutions to things, and you can contribute positively. It's difficult. So why not put that on the wall with it? That's half an idea. I think it's maybe a good one.
I think it could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
And it could be included more. The photo book is going to be an extension of this narrative. You're talking about taking more photographs. So there's 10 main images. The photo book will be the sort of process to some extent. All the other ones that you take there. So if I go to the fishing school, there might be 15 other images that I like that contribute. You could definitely put positivity in that because it should be there. It's in the book and it should be in this project as well.
No doubt. So just to go back for a second, his name is Richard Doran Sherlock. I just remember. I just wanted to for the listeners, and so we can go back and check that podcast. Listen, I think that you touched on a very important thing, that it could be depressing. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence in this one, because on one end, this is the very premise, right? To show people like, look what we've done, reality, right? I don't like it's necessary this wording, but kind of it's like, look what we've done. But like you said, a lot of people, and I'm like that myself. Sometimes people switch off. It's like you go about your day and you have to pay your bills, and your boss at work is a dick, and you had a problem with all these things, and then you turn on the TV and oceans are on fire, and Iran gonna bomb us with nuclear weapons, like right? And the last thing you want
is more stress,
right? And I know that myself, and sometimes like there's a Saturday. Right, it's like nice day. I don't have anything planned, so I'm enjoying my day on Saturday, and I'm sitting in front of a computer. I pull my phone in, look at Twitter, and here is the Irish Wildlife Trust going like this, and like and you're like, I really want to say, guys, on Saturday, please, right? But maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe that's why they're doing. Yeah. But and I think that even on episode 35, where Pádraic was giving that talk, Whittled Away, he said something like that people were saying that you need to do a little bit positive because people were switch off and so on. And then he said like, but that didn't work. So I'm back into just trying to scare them off. And
it's a difficult subject. And I was thinking about it a lot before sitting down to talk to you, because like, how do you deal with it? Everything you've described is true. Life can be very difficult, and it could be a lot more difficult in somebody else's situation. How much of this extra stress do you want to dump onto somebody? But that doesn't change the reality. I've got a very morbid comparison, an unfortunate comparison. People die. We all have to deal with it. It's the reality of the world. This isn't, people aren't dying. Well, in some situations they might be, but it's reality. It's unfortunate, but that doesn't change the situation. Wallowing in it is not going to be good for your mental health, but turning your back on it is insanity. And I mean, that was a central idea of this project, normalizing stuff that isn't normal. If all it does, I'm not trying to scare the life out of people by showing them spruces, but just to present something, go, well, I drive past conifer plantations every day and I never really thought about them in this context. That's all I'm trying to say to you. As in, just look at something and remodel it in your head, reframe it, and just be like, okay, I've got a slightly different viewpoint. Maybe I'll vote for somebody else. Maybe I'll vote for green. Who knows what you might do, but at least you've seen it.
At least you're aware.
You've recognized it. That's all. And Yeah, I think I remember Pádraic. I don't know where I saw him talking about that, about the fact that going the positivity route maybe doesn't work. And I wasn't going to do this. I was like, no, I'm going to concentrate on the negative factors because that's what's the important thing is. But it was actually getting me down doing it, to be honest. I was looking at this project. I had a load of other stuff going on. And I was like, do I want to push through with a visual project? That's
careful, Pádraic, you're not going to end up with PTSD or something. Like, man.
Don't be shooting those cameras. And after a while, I was like, no, it's important. And I want to contribute. So maybe you can add something to it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But I think your idea is good that you know, you showed the negativity and you making people aware, because that's, you know, exactly like a conifer plantations is a good example that, you know, and I had that many times. I'm working with the friends, you know, who came over from Poland, and they're, you know, kind of used to trees and woods, right?
Forest,
and there's forest and there's nothing here, like, right? And we go in and it's like, oh, look, trees. So there is a forest. And they had no idea that actually is kind of antithesis of a forest, what they see. But to them, it's like, oh, there are trees, they're green, it must be good, you know? So
until you walk in there.
Yeah. So that's but I think you have a good idea that to comment that, like, okay, what can be done about it? Like, what are the other solutions to do, you know, because that might give this spark of optimism, and two, direct people towards, you know, because I think that from psychology is like the most depressing and biggest toll on the psyche if you can't do anything about it.
And that's when you turn your back on it.
Right? Yeah, that's when you turn your back on it. But this is like, you know, the worst situation, like again, at war, that is when people are sitting in the trenches, they can't do anything about it. They're just waiting to be bombed, right? This is why members of the special ops groups are less prone to PTSD. And all
they're doing things.
Because they're doing things. They're active. They're trying to do something. While regular infantry, sometimes they're just sitting and waiting. And this is the worst. So this may be it, like, give people this, like, oh, this is what we can do. This is what we can talk about. This is like, so I think it's a great idea. It's
because the thing is, in my head, it's Pádraic's book, you know, and mine is a kind of add-on. So it is something I'm going to talk to him about, but I do like that idea. I think it's it's reasonable. How's
Pádraic view on this? Does he love it?
We haven't talked a huge amount because I'll email him the odd time and go, look at this and do this. And I think the most important thing to him is the new audience. It's the potential of getting at different people, because if you put something in a gallery, it's generally different people looking at it. Yeah. And it hasn't ever gone that direction.
It's more accessible as well.
Yeah, it's more of a kind of a public property thing almost. You just waltz in the door and go, oh, that's interesting. And maybe you gain something for it, or you recognize something from it. So I think that's the most important thing for him. Yeah. And I'll drag him in more and more as we go on and wreck his head more and get him to start writing things.
Yeah. Are you planning to do like a big inauguration, like a big opening?
Not until now, but I think maybe because Maria in UCC likes this idea and she's enthusiastic about it. I hope you are anyway, Maria. I think you are. So yeah, maybe something in there makes sense, because there's a space in the UCC library, Boo Library. I think that was the first place we were going to put it. Something in there makes sense. Yeah. Maybe we should. And it is the 10th anniversary of Green Campus. So yeah.
Exactly. Are you planning to sell tickets for that? To see it?
No, but I'm wondering, will I
for the putting that into the next place, what we talk about it?
I think the photo books might be the sale object, if there is a thing. Because I had no intention of trying to make anything. This isn't why I'm doing it, you know.
But even like we talk about, you know, there's going to be significant money to just move this to a different place. So it's like, well, guys, you know, here's a ticket for the token price, and you know, it all goes into moving that thing to the next place.
And then at the end, you have to physically lift it with me. Like, come over here, put it in the van.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah,
you're adding a kind of a financial element to this project.
Oh, thank you. No, but you know, if I can have this tiny contribution and a few people who hear this podcast, and you know, that's good. I love the idea. Listen, let's talk about some of those points, and maybe let's start with overfishing. Right, massive problem. How do you see this play out?
This is slightly unqualified. I used to be more involved in this. I I went back yesterday to do a bit of research on this. Because,
sorry to cut you off. If someone says that I'm unqualified because I only used to be involved, it's probably the most qualified person there is.
Well, as in my master's is around this subject. It was about marine protected areas in Ireland, and the biggest impact on marine protected areas.
So you're very qualified.
Is fishing. But that was 5 years ago.
But you have a paper. You have a paper on the wall that you're qualified to talk about it.
I think as long as we keep on ignoring fish quotas, we're absolutely kidding ourselves. And it's proven that in parts of the world, where you set up marine protected areas, they do work. Generally speaking, they do work. That's mentioned in the book as well. I think they talk about one in Norway. They work extremely well in most situations. But these are places where you might have mixed activity or complete fishing ban. Yeah. They're usually small. They're not entire fisheries.
But there are also marine protected areas that are just fished like anything else.
Yeah, I mean, in Ireland, they're not protected. We have SACs and we have MPAs that are unprotected. They're just paper. They're bits of paper saying you're not supposed to do this. Everybody ignores them. And at what point... And look, a friend of my father's is a fisheries officer, and he gave me the kind of psychology of friends of his that are like commercial fishermen, and they just feel under the cosh. They feel like they're financially involved to quite a high degree. Obviously, boats are expensive, fuel's expensive. Yeah. When they leave the port, they've got licensing and regulation coming out their ears. They can't do anything without being shouted at. That's the kind of, which is, if you're in that position, it's understandable. I'm not disagreeing with you, but you just can't keep on doing the same thing and expect a different result. You fish one group down to ridiculous levels where it's non-commercial. Fishing down a trophic cascade, I think is the expression for it, or trophic cascading, when you remove one species and then you move on to something else. That's how we ended up fishing for shrimps and prawns. Like they were trash fish. They were like bottom feeders. They became commercial when all the predator-free fish were gone, things like cod and things like that, as far as I know. So when do you stop doing that? Like, as in, what point do you cop onto yourself? I mean, it's...
Well, until you start digging worms from the seabed, and then you're turning that worms into the protein powder. And then when the worms are gone, it's like, oh.
A great example is this, and the expression that I absolutely hate, that trash fish connotation. There's no regulation over them. It's sprat in Ireland is the one. It's like it's a prey fish for whales and everything. Everything eats sprat. And mackerel is a big one. And you can catch them. I don't think that they're completely unregulated. You catch them, the tons. They're worth nothing, and you grind them into fish meal. Some of it's for salmon farming. So you take out what's the name of the bay that Baltimore is in? Roaring Water Bay. That's a very good example of this. You've taken out all the sprat, there's no prey fish, and you just end up with a load of jellyfish. That's fishing down through the cascade. Like, it makes no sense, and you just cannot keep on doing it. But Irish politicians are pretty unwilling to put the foot down because they've got a lot of opposition from the fishing industry. But is this just one of these intractable human conditions? I don't know. Like, I mean, what's the solution there? Like, well, you know what? The final point that I made after I wrote a couple of things that I wrote about this was there's too many boats. It really came down to that. I was looking at Harnessing Our Ocean Wealth, which is the Irish policy document that came up until 2020, which was based on the European Blue Growth document. I think that's what it was called. And it really just came down to the fishing fleet is too big. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. You've got too many boats and not enough fish. I try and reduce the size of the fleet, try and stop people from fishing.
But is it like also these mega super trawlers, right? The infamous Margiris.
I just read about that yesterday.
That shows up time after time after time. I mean,
and flying different flags from different countries.
Oh yeah, but this is
standard practice.
Standard practice. So is it like a number of fishing boats, or is it like a tonnage or whatever? It's the expression of it, right? Because I would imagine that 10 wooden trawlers crewed by 3 fishermen is not gonna do that much damage as one mega factory
maybe not
trawler.
And the impression I got, this is from the distant vaults of memory, was that you've got kind of, I don't know what it's called, like close to shore fishing, which is really kind of national fishing, as in. But we had a terrible deal back in the day when we wanted a deal for our agriculture. I think it was for dairy farming. We basically gave away a lot of our fishing rights. And ever since then, we've had this issue. people can correct me here now, I'm butchering the stats, but like I think do we have a 6 kilometer zone offshore that is just ours, national waters? And then if you have a super trawler that size on that verge fishing those waters, it causes unbelievable damage. But it's cumulative. I mean, like if you had 1,000 of those smaller trawlers, but it's also fishing styles as well. Pair trawling's unbelievably destructive. What's it called when you scour the bottom for scallops?
Bottom trawling?
Yeah, is it bottom trawling? Pulling up scallops, that just destroys everything. There was a period, a friend of mine, his father fished in Killybegs, and he was the first person that told me, which is maybe the main fishing port in Ireland, that there was a dead zone there, which was pretty much from the town out for as far as you could go, because there was such intensive fishing around that area. This guy wasn't involved in fishing, he was an audio nerd, and he mentioned it to me that they were just, that place was destroyed. And later in my life, I went and looked at it and like, I don't know, what's the solution to these things? I mean, policy that makes sense. If you can do it in Norway, you should be able to do it in Ireland. But the issue you always run up against is depth of wealth. If a country is wealthy, they have the comfort and the time to care about the environment. If they're not, they don't. Look at third world countries. Like, but surely we are far enough down that path to care more. And I was wondering myself, like, why does Ireland kind of turn its back on this? Not everybody, some people care a lot. And I'd forgotten that in the intro to the article that I wrote for Irish Wildlife Trust, I'd read a paper, I think a man's name was Noel Cahill. It was a paper from a good while back. And it was low income levels and underpopulation of the country were the kind of 2 primary factors for not having enough people to care about the environment. And the fact that colonized, never colonial, don't have a depth of wealth, and taking direction from the European Union. I wonder maybe in the Irish psyche, we've been in a situation for a long time what we've been told what to do. And now when we get that order, we're like, well, and in a place that wasn't hugely overpopulated, you could do what you peat extraction, you do your bit. It wasn't, you weren't noticing giant impacts. It was slow rather than huge industrial practice. So those factors all together, it tends to, Ireland's just not, we're not that into environmentalism. We're just not. If you look at the UK, it's mentioned in the book, look at the amount of people that are involved in bird watching and that, it's not that common here. Unfortunately.
That's strange, but you're right about the size of the country, and that's just to finish off on the overfishing. You mentioned ignoring quotas, but is it a problem of ignoring quotas, or is it a problem that the quotas are actually set
too high? Yeah, consistently. They do seem. I literally yesterday said I'd better read a bit about fishing quotas. I haven't done it in a long time, and it looked to me. There are some species that the quota's been pulled down by 50%. I don't know which one that was. It was one of the whitefish. But then there was other ones that are being overexploited, and they're still being overexploited. It's this balancing act of being like, well, we're going to take this, but we'll give you this. Whereas we all know, and surely people that fish know, if it's overfished, it's overfished. It's an unfortunate financial situation, but that's reality. Like,
Yeah. What's your view? I'm wondering because recently I was involved in discussions about protection for mako sharks, and you probably heard that the European Union and I think United States opposed the protection of
for commercial fishing purposes.
So the whole deal was, so there were like 2 sides of the discussion, right? One side is like there's no protection for mako, the population goes down and it should be banned for commercial fishing and so on. And the other argument is like, well, no, there's millions and millions of mako sharks, and if you're going to ban this, so this is the argument, and I'm wondering. So mako sharks is just an example, but I'm wondering about what you think about the argument that if banning something, making something illegal is not really good conservation practice because it attracts kind of criminals,
animosity as well,
and criminals, and then they're doing stuff illegally, and like we know, like for example on the ocean, it's very hard to enforce anything because they're so vast, and so the much better practice is to regulate it, right? And the same argument goes for ivory and rhino horn, right? Don't ban it outright, because all that causes is you have this big Vietnamese or whatever cartels focused solely on ivory and rhino horns, and there's just not enough money on the ground to protect those animals, and this is just mess. Like regulate the trade, and then you can. There is a guy in South Africa who I think he owns like a majority of white rhino or whatever in the world, right? And people say like this is crazy because this is critically endangered species, and there's like one guy actually owns the majority of them,
like the living creatures,
like cattle. Right. But the thing is, he invests huge money to actually breed them and have the rhinos.
Wow, I didn't know that was.
And what he does, he cuts their horns off.
Wow.
And he stashes those horns, and then that horn. So rhino with cut off horn is less of a target for poaching.
Yeah.
And obviously he's running my major anti-poaching operation on his property. And he was one of the guy behind legalization of rhino horn trade, but only inside South Africa.
Right, I've never heard about this.
Right, and the argument is like, we can actually save the species if we lift the ban on trade, because then you can actually, it's not like ivory for elephants. That's a different thing, because you cannot just remove safely ivory from the elephant. Yeah. But in the rhino,
it's just hair, really.
It's just hair. Yeah. And so this is another example of the argument that regulating something is much better solution to protecting than outright ban. What's your view on that?
I'll give you the counter argument.
Yes, please.
The problem in the sea is you can't see it. The issue with conservation, the issue with convincing people, the issue with regulation is it's deep and mysterious, It's very difficult to actually prove that the regulation is working. You can go out and tag. It's just a difficult process. It's time consuming. And how many boats do we have in Ireland patrolling Irish waters outside of naval practice for conservation? Mm-hmm. Any? I don't know if we have any. I do agree with you. The fact that if you're like, no, that's not happening anymore, you're going to have some people going, great, this is us sorted here now. There's going to be loads of makos to collect whatever you want to do with them. But that's a very challenging thing to do in the sea. And in my master's, I was actually talking about the fact that trying to figure out if your conservation practice or your regulation is having the desired effect is unbelievably difficult.
Yes.
Because let's say cetaceans, dolphins, whales, those kind of things, fast moving, cover huge areas. It's just difficult to track them.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I don't know. I'm not sure about that one.
Years and years to actually figure out.
Yeah, because, and the other thing is, just to jump back to something, talking about if there was millions of makos, what age are they? Are they all 2 years of age? Because you need some big 30, 40-year-old ones. I don't know how old mako sharks get. Yeah. To actually maintain the species, you want big, powerful males. This
is the thing with those stats. There are people throwing around stats, and you can present any stats in any way you want to prove your point.
Yes, I'm not a stats nerd, but I'm a nerd of the popular statistics or the bending of them. There's books written about it, of graphs where the range doesn't start at 0, it starts at 10.
Oh yeah,
so it's kind of nonsense stuff.
Yeah.
But we're in love with them at the moment. The media loves throwing out stats with absolutely no context that mean absolutely nothing, and not really understanding what stats is for. It's like an art form. Give you estimations and projections. It's not a fact. It's an idea. Yeah. Butchering statistics. We're all at it at the moment. There's amazing books about that.
Okay. So what else? We covered bug extraction. Badgers. You mentioned badgers.
Oh my God.
What about badgers? Tell me about them.
I'll tell you the story anyway. First of all.
Okay.
In a field about 10 minutes west of here, in a car. When I was about 12, have you ever come across Paddy Sleeman? He's a scientist in UCC.
No, I didn't.
He's we all know him as the Badger guy. He's a family friend. And he has been, I presume it was TB he was working on all this past. I'm not sure, I was 12.
Yeah.
But he would get mostly roadkill badgers that were dead. And he needed to, for anybody that's a fan of wildlife, this is a fairly morbid story. You might want to skip this part. So I spent the morning...
Thanks for the warning. There's a warning, so...
taking badger heads out of a bag, cracking the bottom jaw in half, keeping one of the canines as a kind of an identifier, and then burying them because you wanted to take the flesh off the head. This was all to do with the TB process. This is way back. It's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That was the first time I really thought a lot about badgers, and I have actually been out with him when he was trapping them for not to kill them. My take on it, I agree completely. I'm not a badger expert, but agree completely with the book, like 100%. It doesn't work. You're not reducing TB levels by culling badgers. It's one of these things. I was reading yesterday about that lad up the country. He was talking about Killala Bay, and he was talking about, he's a politician whose name I've forgotten, and he was talking about the seals, the fact that they're destroying the river, they're taking all the fish, they're causing all these problems. You're just like, that's an animal that was there long before you were there. And it's the same with the badger scenario. Like, if you could cull them and you're like, well, there's a 20% drop in TB in cattle. Okay, that's a valid argument, but that argument is moot. It's done, it's gone. So now what? You just keep on doing the same thing just because politically it looks good to farmers. I mean, that's a fact. It's an unfortunate opinion, but that's the truth. Like, they're not going extinct. I actually did learn quite a lot about badgers from the book. They feature prominently. So it's not a species that I'd be terrified about them disappearing, but that doesn't make it right that you're out culling species for no other reason just so that people will sign your name on a docket. Like, that's important for politicians though. Yeah, exactly. But so what's the environmental impact with removal of badgers? Culling badgers, I actually don't know. I don't know enough about it.
I'm just wondering whether, because you said that you're not worried about them disappearing.
Yeah, just because they're quite, you still see a lot of them. Well, you see them as roadkill. You know what I mean? If you're still seeing them dead, I wouldn't be that worried about. That's all I meant. That they don't seem to be in low numbers. They're not in low numbers because they spend a lot of their time in hedgerows. The way they live, they have some level of protection. Like, they seem naturally, just by the way they behave. That's why I wouldn't be worried about it. But that doesn't make it right to be culling them. For no good reason. But I actually don't know. Paddy Sleeman would be the man to ask that question. Good podcast, actually.
Okay. Another one. Yeah. We're going to make a list after that.
He's the central badger guy in this country, I reckon. Like, and he's been at it forever.
Lovely. I would love to talk to him. I'd love to talk to him. I'll ask all those questions. Okay. Hedgerows.
Yeah.
And I think that ties to the unfortunate heritage bill that was about the cutting of the hedgerows. And like, can you just give us a brief?
Well, I learned a lot from the book. They're man-made to some extent. I didn't realize that not upkeeping them was causing problems, that they needed to be maintained. I didn't know that. I thought they were just this thing. And from my perspective, running around in fields when I was younger, they were the main part of the interest for me. There's nothing in the field. It's a monoculture. There's nothing there, where the hedgerows are like channels for the animals. That's where I go looking for hedgehogs. And I learned that they need to be up. And from a farming perspective, if you can throw up barbed wire, why would you maintain a hedgerow? You're then trying to convince somebody that you're doing it strically for conservation purposes, which is a great reason. But if it's a pain in the arse and a monetary drain for a farmer, that's a difficult sell. It's a great photographic subject because it's the most normal thing in the world. Like, they are just, I'm looking at one out the window as we're talking. They're just, and when people come to Ireland, they think they're amazing. All these hedgerows, and you're like, well, that's what's left of our forests to cover. Like, to some extent, not that you have big trees and hedgerows that often, but like, I think it's a brilliant photographic subject. It's probably the most normal one, and it's the one that should maybe get a lot of attention, because how often do you think about hedgerows?
That's I just thought it just struck me. You know, I should pick that up on the earlier, but it's a hard job that you're doing, because you're trying to make impactful photographs of normal things. I've
been at that forever. I love it. There's a style that's been doing that for a long time, and my aunt told me that it started in California. I don't know what the style's called. It's just this kind of visual aesthetic of normal objects, and it makes them look strange. If you take a picture of a post box in a certain way, in a certain light, they look weird. I don't know why. It's something about focusing on normality and putting it in a different context, kind of giving attention to normality. And I love those type of photographs. I love them. I don't do them much anymore, but I only do them. And one of the ones in my head was conifers would be like that. Hedgerows, obviously. There's nothing there. And trying to make something engaging out of something normal.
Yes.
It's a challenge as well, to some extent.
Oh, the huge. And listen, what about dairy farming? Because that's another one. God. We're going into contentious subjects, right?
This is probably the biggest one in the country.
Yeah. I remember just before you jump into that, I don't remember which podcast was it. I was talking with my friend who is a game manager, and I realized that that podcast goes like as if I almost intentionally trying to throw him under the bus repeatedly, asking him about the farming and dairy and, you know, call this and that and something else. It's like, well, you know, I hope you don't mind. But,
I don't anyway.
He was very cool, but it's so I don't want this to turn like I'm trying to, you know, go to contentious subjects. But I guess that's that's the normal thing, right? We have dairy cows and people don't know what is really the impact. So
there's a guy called Simon Harrison. Do you know what he'd be? He'd be a good podcast. He'd actually be amazing. Awesome. He's a great orator. He's incredible at talking. And he...
Can you pull that closer to your face? Just pull it up.
Up and in. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
He's involved in loads of things, ecology, freshwater quality. And I recently did he was contributing to one of the modules that we were building in the group that I work with in UCC, which is Gems Water. They're part of UNEP. And as a kind of a favour to him, I recorded some footage from that day and we toured around in East Cork, kind of west, looking at just little streams in hedgerows. That's the last time I was in a hedgerow. And water quality going from one area, going about 5 kilometres through a catchment. And one of them was this little corner right beside a road, right beside a dairy farm yard, like an actual yard, and looking at visual water quality issues. Like this stream was just slime mold, which is the stuff, as far as I know, it grows in anoxic conditions. It's dead. It's effectively dead. You might get a type of worm that grows in it, a rat tail, something or other, and slime mold. Now, my boss, Debbie's probably going to kill me for my inaccuracy, but so I was videoing this stuff and it is literally slime growing at the bottom and it's because of fecal matter in the water column. And that's because of cow shit flowing into our water. This idea of spreading slurry, it's old school. I've asked farmers, why do you do it? I mean, okay, it does, makes things grow, but you fairly quickly get to the maximum nitrate phosphate concentration, which is like fertilizer concentration. And then you're spreading slurry on. It's not doing anything unless you leave the field fallow for a while. And it rains, it all goes into the water column, into rivers, streams. You end up drinking it. It's making blue flag beaches not be blue flag anymore. I have a house in the Hinge, so this is water quality in the Hinge is a serious issue. It's not the only water quality issue. There's also human fecal matter going into the sea. I don't know, and we're trying to increase the herd count in Ireland. The last I heard was by 1/3 to facilitate mostly the Chinese markets for selling milk to China. And it's being ignored. We already have water quality issues, serious ones from cow shit running into the water. And now we're trying to increase herd sizes without really, as far as I know, without having a concerted effort to really try and solve the situation before we make it worse, or at least try harder. And there are other options. There's a guy called Jerry Murphy who works inside the ERI, the institute where my centre is based, and he does biodigestion gas. He's been talking about, I actually interviewed him once about this very subject for something in college. And you can take cow poo, you can put it into a biodigester. Now it's a technical process. You need to build digesters and it's and you end up with something that is inert in one sense, as in it doesn't cause you harm. It's an incredible fertilizer. It's not a slurry pit that people fall into and drown in. It's not tourists driving around in West Cork in the summer and the absolute stink of ammonia. You've probably seen this yourself. You drive past the field and go, that is outrageous, the smell coming off it. There's just everything is wrong with slurry spreading. But what are you going to do? It's like the main thing in Ireland. All the land is privately owned. So
is it dairy farming or is it slurry spreading?
Well, slurry spreading is a byproduct of dairy farming and beef farming, because what are you going to do with all the shit? Okay. That's why you have slurry pits. That's my main bugbear with it. Now, there's a load of other factors. The book talks about loads of them, but for me, it's kind of a water quality issue because I'm always in the water surfing.
Yes.
The area that I work in, even though I'm a designer, I'm not an academic in there, it's talked about, And fecal matter in water is a very good way to make yourself sick, either human or cattle or anything really.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing thing in Lahinch. Like the water quality there is always taking dips, and it's because it's a heavily agricultural area. It rains and it all just pours onto the beach into the sea.
Especially with the amount of rain in Ireland.
Yeah. Difficult issue. And I mean, when you've got the Irish Farming, is it IFA, the Irish Farming Association?
I think so.
They very strongly, of course, they're going to resist any changes to what they're doing. What do you do? Most of the land in Ireland is privately owned for agriculture. A friend of mine is a dairy farmer. He's sound, total, and a very good scientist, works at EPA. It's an interesting conversation.
Does he spread slurry?
I don't know.
You're gonna ask him that. Do you spread slurry?
Yeah,
come on, man. What are you doing?
Well, I know that we've had these conversations before, and we'd be like, so probably does.
How was he? How was he? Was he defensive about it, or like does he have a point? Does he making a good point?
I think we didn't go that deeply into it because I thought we might have argued with each other. But this is a guy that knows a lot about water quality, like a lot, serious. So he'd be a very important person to ask about it. Yeah. And he's in, he I don't know, does he manage to farm himself or is his family does it together? And he's in the EPA. Oh. In water quality. Okay. So I'm not going to give you anything that he said to me. No, we didn't. He actually, it always seemed like a subject that was going to make us argue. Yeah. Even though I know a fifth of what or 5% of what he knows about it. Yeah. But I can still shout, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, of course, that's the easy part. That's the easy part. Okay, what we have left? Sheep grazing. Okay, before we go into sheep grazing, you mentioned that Ireland is trying to increase the cow herd because of going to the Chinese market.
As far as I know, that's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thought I have is, I found it a little bit funny, and this is more of a big politics and China and how China grows, and that I find a little bit funny that China initially kind of, well, not destroyed, but took a huge toll on its environment through its growth, right?
And the biggest maybe ever.
Yes, but now they kind of trying to reverse that.
They have to.
And what's happening is now they're going to start take care of their environment, and everybody else will trash their environment just to supply the demand in China because they're so powerful economy. I find like I heard this story about the trash and the waste that China used to import.
They did, yeah. Up to really recently.
Yes. And then I said like, okay, stop. It's just not doing this anymore. Right?
And this is recycling. Yeah. Stuff that may or may not be getting recycled. Yeah. And hearing stories now of boats that are have sailed or driven to China and being turned back. Yeah. And they're in no man's land. They literally have 80 million tons of whatever. Yeah. And now what do you do with it? Yeah. You're trying to find another country, maybe Bangladesh, somewhere that has no regulation at all because they're so poor, and you just send it there.
Is that not the problem? Like for Ireland, for example, the amount of waste we produce? It doesn't feature on your list.
No, it doesn't. And it's not really... Does he get into plastics in the book? I don't think he does. It's kind of a hot topic at the moment, the plastic thing, because it contributes to biodiversity loss, but in a nefarious, difficult to track way, very difficult to figure out.
Yeah. I kind of forget for a moment that you're kind of sticking to the book. You're not just going around. I might go like do another series. Everything else that's screwing the environment that is not covered in that book.
I'm going to give you one more podcast person.
Okay, awesome. I feel like we started to making notes because I feel like we hit a stop on the recorder and it's like, who are all these person? There's a fourth one.
A friend of mine called Tad who works in the ERI. I'm going to butcher his second name, Kajewski. Yeah, Kajewski. Polish second name?
It seems like a Polish name, but I wouldn't dare to figure out which is how it sounds.
I think it's Kajewski. So, Kajewski, hopefully I got close. That sounded better.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
But it's not a name. I just made it up.
All right.
It's just a sound that I made. I'm sure you're butchering it too much.
It's incomprehensible.
Anyway.
He is recycling and waste. I don't know. No, I can't. I wouldn't be able to answer that. But Ireland's waste output, I just know we're terrible at recycling. I've asked an interesting point that I always wondered, people seem to struggle with what goes in a recycling bin. I struggle with that. What's the level that the plastic needs to be at? And he told me the other day, a couple of months ago, that if you crush it in your hand and it regains its shape, it's worth recycling. I'm not sure does it have to go back to the perfect biscuit structure. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or did you just kind of crisp packet? Never heard that before, which is a kind of an easy point to work off of. But he's big into that.
Yeah.
He'd be a good man to talk to.
That'd be good.
I can't answer that one.
All right.
My unqualified opinion can't go there.
Okay. Anyway, so let's talk about sheep grazing and the damage it does. I heard an opinion that the environment suffers because people stop grazing sheep on the highlands, or have you heard that?
Yes.
Okay, can you please explain to our listeners?
I don't know if I can.
And to me, because I didn't really quite get that. So why it is allegedly bad that you're not grazing sheep? What happens exactly?
I always thought and was of the opinion that overgrazing causes you get rid of all the plants. Soil gets saturated, you get soil creep. At the end of that process, if it's hot enough, you get desertification.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they had that opinion that sheep grazing somehow contributes to what? I don't know. I mean, I just don't know how it can, because if you go and look at these areas, maybe it's a certain amount of grazing that allows new growth. If that's what you're after, for what? Like, if you want something to grow effectively, let's just say rewilding. Well, then no grazing is going to help, as far as I'm concerned, unless you have wild sheep, maybe. I don't understand that point of view. Yeah. I'm not sure where they're getting it from. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what contributes to that. If you, as I said, if you drive from here to Kerry, we're very close to the road between Cork and Kerry. It's ridiculous, the state of the hills, and it's got this kind of mysterious Irish thing going on. But it looks like Iceland, which caused unbelievable ecological damage by chopping down all their trees, and trees that take an incredible length of time to grow in the soil that they have. That's what it looks like. It looks like the moon.
Yeah.
How is that a good thing? And I mean, it's heavily subsidized. It's an industry that probably wouldn't survive without subsidies. It wouldn't survive without subsidies. I just don't know where that opinion is coming from. And I have heard it really recently. And I don't know what they said to me. They didn't convince me anyway.
Yeah,
because I don't remember what their argument was.
I don't remember that argument either. But it surprised me. As far as for sheep, I was talking with my friend who is a sheep farmer, and he told me, how to make $1 million on the sheep? You got to have 1 billion first. so
maybe a bigger country.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's his opinion on the place getting of it's a good thing? Was it him?
No, it wasn't him. Like, he's really into smallhold farmers, family farms. And he's incredibly hardworking man, and he just tries to make money. And he got sheep, and he got like a seasonal jobs, and he does fencing, and he does predator control, and he do like literally, he likes his life. He's enjoying, and I can tell you that this can be enjoyable life compared to going into exactly. I was gonna say that. Yeah,
burning your eyes and destroying your back.
Exactly. But at the same time, it's hard.
Very hard. You need to be physically tough.
You need to be physically tough, and you go and you do your farming, and then you do whatever else you do, and then you do fencing.
And you scrape by.
Yeah.
And then there's a change in policy, which we think is great.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's not great. That's my lifestyle done.
Exactly. And I suppose this is why those subjects are so contentious, because
humans are awkward.
Yeah, exactly. And there's often this argument like, it's correct that people sitting somewhere in the city, in Dublin and Cork,
disconnected
in their comfortable chairs and their air conditions, and say, we changed, and that impacts the guy in the wellies in the field. And
it does.
And like, what do you know, right?
But we've hit it a couple of times now. It does, but look at it this way: my contract ends at the end of March. I'm not turning around to the government like this is just my opinion now. Like, and I don't feel entitled to a job, and I kind of think that some people do, maybe because they own the land. Like, why is there an entitlement? And it's this kind of cultural rural thing, which is valid. I mean, you don't want to go to a place and it's empty, and it's nice to meet people that work on the land. It's an incredible thing. It's just, I'm not sure, should there be an entitlement to that? Like, why is there an entitlement? Like, there isn't for my job. I don't know.
We're wading right into the contentious subjects, but I agree with that. Yeah. The example I'm giving, like, first of all, land is an asset. It's an incredible asset.
And should it be how do you own it as well? Like, as in, you own it because you've had it for a few hundred years, so?
Yeah, well, but I mean, you have many opportunities, and if you can't do this, you can do something else, right? You can do mountain bike park, for example, right, on the land. So it's incredible asset. But aside from that, recently there was this protests or whatever in terms of beef prices, right?
Yeah, the beef price, pretty close to here.
Beef prices are too low, and they're like, would you imagine manufacturers of a hard drive and magnetic storage protesting that the prices per megabyte are going too low?
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison.
You need to pay more for your SD cards because we're producing them. Like, that's just like,
it's bizarre, right?
Right?
Now, in fairness to that one, there's a squeeze from but I mean, it's just another financial problem.
I fully understand that this is the comparison is absolutely.
No, I think it's valid.
You think it's valid? But the fact, like, okay, this is the market, this is the capitalism, right? This is how it works. Something has a value, and if there's too much of it, the value goes down, and then naturally some people drop off. So then it becomes less of it, and value goes up.
Less boats in the fleet,
for example. So,
but I think it's some sort of. It feels like a romantic ideal, and I get it. Like, working outside all day, if you can handle physicality, is an amazing thing. I would love to do it if it was probably tougher. I don't know if I don't think I could be a farmer. It's just a romantic aspect to it, and people recognize that. You go out to the countryside for a weekend or whatever, you're from the city, and it's amazing. It's a nice place to be. Fishing is the most romantic thing ever. They consider themselves the last hunters in the world, really. Like legitimate hunting for. Well, I suppose.
Well, they are because this is the wild animal. I guess
it's a dangerous place.
I guess this is the biggest problem with fishing, that this is the whole industry that is based on wild animals,
stocks, which should be collective and not just. But intractable human problems. Like, but the romantic ideal, I think, is strong in that one for farmers. They feel connected to the land, rightfully so. But you come right back to the issue of, like, that's fair enough. But that doesn't change the reality of the situation. If you have large dairy herds destroying water quality, what are you going to do about it? You just can't keep on doing it forever. Or you can, and then you end up in a situation where it's a country that's not nice to be in. Like, if you're driving around a place and there's an unbelievable stink of ammonia, is that a nice thing to be driving past? That's a small one. I mean, you can go a lot further with environmental destruction.
Yeah, but
it's an aspect. It's one you can smell. I don't know. Right. You're not going to get any answers. Just more problems.
No, I know. Did we cover everything? We've been on a
good few of them.
Fishing and badgers and grazing.
This is loosely related. It's something I looked at yesterday, because I mean, the book is about biodiversity loss, but climate change is the hot topic at the moment, and they're really interlinked. And I was thinking to myself, why, climate change denial? I don't feel we have that in Ireland. Because we don't have industry big enough to put their money into trying to deny it, which is really where climate denial comes from. It's mostly in our, it looks like it's mostly in the US. It's not just the US, but it's that side of the Atlantic. And we don't really have it. And because in my head, I was like, oh, why do we do this? And I was like, oh, well, we don't really. I don't know any climate deniers. We're more kind of, we just don't care about it. You know what I mean? As in, we're not denying it. We're just not involved.
Well, is it part of that? Is that the weather will get nicer?
You mean coming out of winter? Oh no, it'll get warmer.
Is it warmer?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
If that's all it is, then they are deluded. Yeah, and wetter and crazier and windier. But yeah, it probably will get hotter.
It's going to be hotter. It's going to have this nice summer.
The other day, I was doing something at work, and the weather was miserable, and I was thinking, I'm glad I'm not in Australia.
Yep.
For a long time in Ireland, it was like, oh, Australia's an amazing place. We all went there. But I'm certainly glad I'm not there at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think Ireland, going right back to the start, and why I'm doing that project, I don't think we deny climate change, and I don't think we necessarily understand or deny biodiversity loss, but we're just not really involved in it. And that's what that project is for, to try and just make it apparent.
Exactly. And look, I think you're doing a great job, and it's a great idea. I'm really happy that you agreed to be on this podcast. We had a great time.
Thank you. It was terrifying.
Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't.
That was fine, but I thought it was going to be terrifying.
Oh, no. Right. Listen, Patrick, I wish you all the best with that project. I hope we're going to stay in touch, and maybe we're going to do some other projects.
Yeah.
Anyone who listens to this podcast, if you feel like you can contribute in any way to even transportation or whatever else,
padded van,
get in touch. And Pádraic, thank you very much.
Thanks a million. Cheers.